We done prayed these prayers.
Oh, you done prayed these prayers?
I don't know about you. Oh, just me? Oh,
I mean, I'm just saying, don't put me in this.
so it's just me?
What did I do?
This is I statements.
Yeah.
Okay, everyone, we're using I statements today. Yeah, well, I have prayed these prayers where we like, Lord, get them, God. Yeah. And then it's just like, yeah, we should never do that. I'm growing, right? I've grown.
Okay.
I'm not saying I go currently, but like I have. You heard the past tense?
Oh, okay.
Okay, past tense.
Yeah. Yo, welcome back to the Vibes Daily podcast. It is day 254 of our year-long series we have titled Devoted, as we are journeying through the entire Bible from cover to cover, from Genesis to Revelation. You have joined us in our the book of Ezekiel, actually here, and we pick up really almost dead center in the middle at this point of this book. And I am back again, joined by my wife, Victoria, who's here as we pick up here at chapter 25.
Yeah.
And so just before we get into this section, these four chapters that we have here today, which all kind of go together in some ways. Reminder, we left off yesterday kind of with the sad news of Ezekiel's wife passing and the sign that had to be for the people to know. And just another illustration or visualization of something of the judgment that's coming to Judah and to Israel. And so we pick up here in chapter 25, and just like Isaiah and just like Jeremiah, God does not limit his prophecy and his judgment to just the people of Judah, but he takes time to also call out the neighboring countries and these other countries that are around. So we pick up in 25 and start with the Ammonites as kind of the first group that's addressed here in 25, before also dealing with the Moabites and the Edomites and the Philistines. But let's just start with the Ammonites. What jumped out to you in these first kind of 7 verses or so here?
Yeah, I think for Ammon, it was just interesting because with each of these, he actually tells them like why. Because they're always just because. So we kind of get a little bit of insight on what was happening with some of these other nations as Israel was, around. Like we have a lot about the kings and a lot about, in Chronicles about what Judah specifically was doing in their kings. And we don't always get like a lot of the insight of the role that other nations were often playing. It was like either we went up to battle against them and we conquered them, or we went up to battle against them and we lost, right? And so, so it was interesting just to see like some of the heart posture possibly of like all these other nations that are around. So for this one though, it was like, he was just so direct. Like in verse 7, I'm sorry, I'm jumping all the way to the end, but it's like, I will cut you off from the peoples and eliminate you from the countries. I will destroy you, and you'll know that I'm God. Like, and like, he's like, my hand is stretched out against you. And it's just, he's just doing this roll call. And that's what I would never want to be on the other end of that.
Yeah. Yeah. I thought it was a great call out, like what you just mentioned, kind of on what you started with, which is, this is probably the first section that, I noticed that, again, it does give us the why for each nation. We have heard God's judgment on each one of these nations, right? Over and over again with Jeremiah and Isaiah, and again, even a little earlier in Ezekiel in some ways, but like, they don't give us the because. And so I think calling out for the Ammonites at the because was essentially because they taunted Judah, right?
Because you said, aha.
Yeah, they said, aha. But even like they clapped their hands and stamped their feet and rejoiced, right? Like, and so they essentially taunted and found pleasure in the fall of Judah,
right?
In Jerusalem. And so when it was desecrated, right, and all those things, they kind of found joy in the pity of others. And that's what ultimately led to their judgment. And I think that's just so huge, right?
Yeah, that's why. Yeah, Yeah.
Like that's crazy that, and again, we're not judging them. I think that there's been times, right? And we've seen this with others, maybe even in ourselves, where like, yeah, we almost go, that's what they get, when something happens.
We don't pray these prayers.
Oh, you done prayed these prayers?
I don't know about you. Oh, just me? Oh,
I mean, I'm just saying, don't put me in this.
so it's just me?
What did I do?
This is I statements.
Yeah.
Okay, everyone, we're using I statements today. Yeah, well, I have prayed these prayers where we like, Lord, get them, God. Yeah. And then it's just like, yeah, we should never do that. I'm growing, right? I've grown.
Okay.
I'm not saying I go currently, but like I have. You heard the past tense?
Oh, okay.
Okay, past tense.
Yeah.
I have.
Okay.
You be leaving me out here hanging.
No, I just wanted you to have an opportunity to confess.
Are we one?
Whatever was.
Are we one? It's we.
Whatever was.
We have prayed.
No. I didn't pray those prayers.
Yeah.
I haven't prayed the get 'em prayers.
Well,
But
guess me not as close as I thought.
But I do think, like you said, just that finding joy in others' downfall, right?
Yeah.
Is ultimately what caused their judgment. So, like I said, we'll talk about the why on each of these, but I felt like it was important to at least deal with the Ammonites, right?
That's good.
And so, yeah, they'll get got off, but we get to the Moabites, and essentially, their because was they not taunted, but essentially accused Judah of being like all the other nations, right? That's what it kind of says here in verse 8. Because Moab and Seir said, look, the house of Judah is like all other nations.
Yeah.
Therefore, I'm about to expose Moab's flank, right? So essentially, theirs was this, again, taunt is not the best word, but just like the accusation, right? That they were simply the same as everybody else is what caused the Moabite judgment. But was there anything else in these couple verses that you felt significant?
Well, you know what? Actually, it's not in these verses, but in my commentary that kind of stuck out to me here. Okay. Was that like the Moabite troops, they believe, have joined forces with like the Babylonian troops during this time. And there's mentioning of it. And they attacked King Jehoiakim in Jerusalem in 2 Kings chapter 24. But then when they were defeated, it says that the Moabites responded with delight, right? And so we saw that in Jeremiah. I think it was they mentioning it for chapter 48. I couldn't have pulled that out of my memory. So chapter 48, Jeremiah, and then also in Zephaniah. And so, but yeah, so it is just like, not only were you said, like, look at their downfall, ha ha ha, like all the other nations, right? But it was also that, like, they were taunting and joining alliances and rejoicing at the downfall. Because, I mean, at the root of it, and I didn't say this for the Ammonites, but at the root of it, like, the Lord is kind of like taking this personal, right? Like, this is my nation. Yeah. So when you taunt them, you taunt me, right? Like, this is like daddy bear. Like, don't mess with my cubs. Like, you mess with them, you mess with me. And so I feel like that's what's happening here. Yeah. Where it's kind of like, I'm the one who built them up. Yeah. So you should not be looking for their downfall.
Yeah. I mean, it goes back to kind of even like what happened when they came out of Egypt, right? Which was like the whole point of this war between me and these other countries, whether it's Egypt, whether it was the land of Canaan when they went there, whatever, was really always about his glory, right? And about him declaring who he was. So like even, what Moses says to him when they're coming out of Egypt, and God is so upset with the people that he wants to just wipe out all of Israel. Moses is like, reminds him, if you do that, the Egyptians going to be like their God couldn't even save them, from the wilderness, essentially, which reminds God, like, yeah, at the end of the day, this is about me and me establishing who I am. So you're right. He takes offense because if you mess with his people, it essentially says that their God cannot protect them. Exactly. Right. And so he's like, don't mistake my judgment of them, right, for like my inability to protect them. Right. No, I can protect them and I can keep you from them, but no, I'm going to let it. And it almost feels like, as a parent, right, like letting your kid make those mistakes that's going to get them in trouble. You know what I'm saying? Like if you already know, you told him not to go to that party or whatever the case may be, or you told him not to hang out with those kids or those friends, whatever. And you tell him, you're like, fine, I'm gonna let it happen. And when they go get arrested, you know what I'm saying? Because they were doing something dumb they shouldn't have done. It's like, oh no, this wasn't because I wasn't a parent that could have prevented them. I could have prevented them from doing this, but they need to learn their lesson. And this was me teaching them their lesson. Don't mistake the fact that I let this happen.
Yeah.
Be like a sign that I couldn't have stopped it, or I couldn't have done something different.
Right.
So, yeah, I think that is a little bit of why he took it personal. Yeah,
Definitely.
But speaking of taking it personal, I don't know if there's any nation that he took more personal than his issue with the Edomites. Specifically. I don't know why, but the why we get in verse 12 is because Edom acted vengefully against the house of Judah and incurred grievous guilt by taking revenge on them. And so we know kind of again from the beginning all the way back at when they were the Exodus from Egypt, Edom was not very kind to Israel. It has time and time again come back to them, and as you said, in this case, even taken revenge on them. Anything jumped out to you in these few verses about Edom?
Well, yeah, the first thing that stuck out to me again was reading my commentary on this, where it mentions that like one of the most blatant examples of Edom's opposition to the people of God were their role in the destruction of the Jerusalem temple. And that's something that like it just did not stick out to me over the chapters. And so that was new. And then also just like how they responded, like they're supposed to be like brothers, right? Like to just Jacob and Esau, right? They're like brother cousins, the trickle down, right?
Yeah.
And so, so here it was just like, yeah, like because of how they spoke against them, right? That like this, it was really vengeful. My translation says, right, in all this. Like talk about revenge and taking revenge on them, so like all that, like it just seemed like there was this hardness of heart, and there was no love. There was no familial love here between them.
Yeah. No, that seems long lost, which is honestly like kind of sad because Esau had forgiven Jacob, right? If you just think back to like the brothers themselves, despite the fact that like Jacob stole Esau's blessing. Like Esau himself had forgiven Jacob. But I do think that like the reality is that the blessing that Isaac gives Jacob ultimately like for Esau essentially assured this would be the case.
That's what happened.
Right?
Yep.
And even what he ultimately tells Esau, when Esau is like, well, give me something. He's like, I ain't got nothing left. But he says something to him like that essentially assured that these two countries would be at odds with each other, kind of for a while. So yeah, I think like, again, it's sad because I'm just sure the brothers themselves are kind of like, man, this stinks. Like if they were in heaven looking, which I don't think they could, but like if they were, I think they'd probably be sad that this is ultimately how, their descendants became. But yeah, to your point before we move to the Philistines, Tony, in my commentary also mentions essentially that same issue that Obadiah kind of gives us that picture some. And so maybe when we get to that, we can talk a little bit more. We read Obadiah in like 2 weeks or so. But let's get to the Philistines, which their why and their because essentially is they acted in vengeance and took revenge with deep content, destroying because of their perpetual hatred, which essentially says their issue with the Philistines is they always hated them. They always hated it. It's perpetual. We always hated them and can't stand them. Just can't stand them Israelites.
Not just them Israelites.
Just can't stand them Israelites.
Don't know why, but we don't like it.
We can't, right? And so just perpetual. Just always there. Yeah, anything jump out to you kind of in this end of 25? Yeah,
I think it's just interesting because Philistines seem like this group of people who never died. And always was still around, always still against, no matter. I mean, there was no alliance because at some point you become a small nation and it's like, oh, I'm aligned with this. It's like, yeah, no. They were always against, no matter how small they were. And so, but he said, I will execute severe vengeance against them with furious rebukes. And just that language is that severe. I was like, oh wow, like you serious?
Yeah. and they will know that he's the Lord, as he likes to make clear, right? Every time. So good.
Cool.
Well,
26.
Yeah, we'll get into 26, and kind of want to take 26, 27, and 28 together in a sense, right? So again, we don't have to go like jump all the way around. We can still work through it, but let's talk about them together to start, because it all deals with Tyre here, right? And so it is this like coastal city that man was like rich in trade and wealthy in some ways, right? And like, and had all this stuff, and ultimately man found pleasure in Judah's fall,
right?
Because it probably what it meant economically for them, right? So like they kind of found pleasure, and so God kind of deals with them over these next three chapters. We get 26, 27, and 28, where we'll end here today. The first two kind of dealing more with the country as a whole, or island as a whole, and then the 28 dealing more so with the leader, rulers, and king of Tyre. But what jumped out to you as you looked at their downfall? Because God gives us a lot more here than he did for the kind of those other nations.
He did.
What was interesting to you over these couple chapters?
Yeah, because it was just like, I'm gonna level up on their destruction. Like, I'm gonna get as many riches as I can, right? Like, it says in verse, is this still 2? I will be filled now that she lies in ruins, right? Like, she's been turned over to me. Like, it was like, okay, they're gone, they're being destroyed. And I'm gonna come and like gather everything I can. Like, she will, verse 5, she will become a plunder for the nations, right? And her villages in the mainland will be slaughtered by the sword. They'll know that I'm the Lord. The Lord is not speaking about Tyre. And it's just like, as much as they're saying like Judah is going to be their plunder, and they thought they were going to level up, the Lord's like, yeah, no, I'm going to make you plunder. And Tyre was still wealthy itself, right? Well known. And so I think that was really interesting, where it's kind of like they're looking to get something from Judah in their downfall, but the Lord's like, no, I'm coming after you, and I'm sending Nebuchadnezzar after you. And this verse 10, I don't know why this just stuck out to me. I don't know if there's really any significance at all, but it was like, his horses will be so numerous that the dust will cover you. When he enters your gates as an army entering a breached city, your walls will shake from the noise of cavalry wagons and chariots. And it's kind of like this like scene that I see in my head, like all this like dust from the horses, and like the shaking of the walls and the city gates and stuff. And so I'm just like imagining like how forceful and how many there has to be for them to be coming in. Yeah.
That's good. Yeah, I think part of what I find so interesting in this is, and I'm taking kind of 26 and 27 together. One is that like at the end of 26, it tells us, we've pointed out the difference between God saying like he'll restore a city versus like a city will never exist again, which is what we get in 21, right? I will make you an object of horror. You will no longer exist. You will be sought, but will never be found again. This is the Lord's declaration. And just even before that, like even the fact that like he essentially tells them like he's sending them to hell. Like, you know what I'm saying? He says he's going to send them to this pit, which is capitalized. You know what I'm saying? Like this is this proper place, right? He's going to descend into, and then he's going to inhabit them. And again, like I said, they'll never be seen again. And then he goes on in 27 to essentially give an illustration that it's almost as if they just sunk to the bottom of the ocean or the sea, right? Like that it's just going to descend into the sea and it's going to sink. And I think like when I couple that with, of course, just that like sending them to the pit and going to hell, but also just seeing the imagery of just like sinking underwater, I think it's just really interesting that he really is saying like for this country, like they won't exist anymore. And then ironically that of course they're a port city, right? Like, and so it's kind of like, oh, this thing that you've been using to ultimately like earn you lots of money, and this is where you trade and where you get your where your entire economy pretty much comes from, is the fact that you are this port city, that this,
Yes.
where this water's coming. I'm actually going to use that against you here and sink you in a sense by using that illustration and something that they would understand. So I thought that was really
so good. That was so good. That's real. That was really nice.
Thanks, babe.
Wish I would have thought about that myself, but we thought about it because we connected. See how I do? You see how, how I do?
Taking credit.
You see how I do?
Is what I
understand our unity. I understand the covenant.
You know.
Anyways,
we won't have this.
Moving on.
Conversation right here. But yeah, so that was kind of 26, 27, some of which jumped out to me. Anything else in 27 though, before we kind of get to 28 to close out today?
And well, okay, just for me, Tyre, we've heard this place, right?
Yes.
But it even rings even more when they list out Tarshish, right? Mm-hmm. Like Tarshish was like ding ding ding, Jonah's story. And so so it was just like like Tarshish was your trading partner because of your wealth of every kind. So it was just like you dabbling with it.
Yeah.
Like you are in, he's naming all these different places. Even in their own city that was like elaborate and with all this lush and this purple fabric and all these blue awnings and this ivory, like all these things that they had, like they traded the best of the best, and with the best of the best nations, right?
Yeah.
And so
which I think is so interesting, because I was actually that's the thing I was going to call it, because when we get to 28, some of that is also mentioned when it deals with Tyre's like king or ruler, right? Like that ultimately, and I'm gonna get to his issue here in a sec, but it's very similar. What's so interesting is that, man, this country, they actually had the wealth and riches of this land, right? Of the earth, of what was available to them. Yet they still found pleasure in the downfall of somebody else. You know what I'm saying?
They still needed more.
Like they were still greedy. They wanted more. Like because Israel's out of the way and now we can earn more. And I'm like, it really feels like the rich getting richer. Like it felt like, those that are already in that top 1% feeling like they just gotta get more, right? I gotta get more and more and more. And I'm like, man, that's crazy that they were living in that much luxury.
Yeah.
And still not satisfied
at all. And that was a big thing that you said, because their laws probably weren't the laws of the Israelites, and although the Israelites was not following these laws, but like wealth for the Israelites means that you're going to take care of the foreigner, you're going to take care of the widows, you're going to take care of the orphans, you're going to take care of the priests, right? And the Levites. Like, we were sharing wealth. We were supposed to be sharing wealth, right? So the Lord made them abundant so that they can share. And it would really shock me if I would see that coming from this nation, right? Where their abundance of wealth was for the benefit of others.
Yeah. Yeah. Like I said, it to me is a cautionary tale, right?
Absolutely.
It's just like being satisfied, being content, not chasing more and more and more, right? Because ultimately it leads to their downfall, right? Had they been content with the riches that they already had, like they'd have just stayed out of the way, and what happened to Judah would have happened to Judah, and they'd have been fine,
Yeah.
But essentially, because they were greedy and wanted more, and they weren't content, it leads to their own downfall as well. And so, and I feel like it's a cautionary tale about what we chase after. But again, speaking of which, as we get to 28, which kind of we close out with, it got so bad, particularly for the leaders, that his biggest, I would say, sin, right, is that he considered himself a god.
That part.
Right? So if you look at verse 2, it's like, you are a man and not a god. Well, let me back up. Verse 1. So the word of the Lord came to me, son of man, say to the ruler of Tyre, this is what the Lord of God says. Your heart is proud, and you have said, I am a god. I sit in the seat of gods in the heart of the sea, yet you are a man and not a god, though you have regarded your heart as that of a god. Like, just, it's, like you said, that pride. and the decision to elevate himself to the place of God, right? And what's crazy to me is as you read this, it's like God even acknowledges, like, bro, you were wise and talented and gifted, and you had resources. You had natural ability and talent and wisdom. But as soon as you leveraged that and took that to the point of, like, I mean, they were like, yo, you were as wise as Daniel. Like, wiser than Daniel. I'm sorry.
Daniel's got all the clout right now.
Yeah, like, and you were wiser than him. You had great skill in trading, right? Like, you increase, you are all those things. But because you became proud, because you made that about you, and you thought you created all those things, and you earned all that, man, you will find out that you're a man today.
Absolutely.
Because you're going to die.
You will die.
Because if you were a god, I couldn't kill you. But you're a man. So you're going to die. I was like,
yeah, that was good. That is. And just to think that, like, we've seen what's been happening in the spiritual realm. Homie, you no match.
Oh, yeah.
Like,
the cherubim and the...
the cherubim. No. And those were just angels, right? You know, like, no, you need to level up. Like, and it's the pride, but then yet the ignorance.
Yeah.
That is really underneath all that. Like, if you only knew, you know, what it was actually like. And so, yeah, that was really interesting because it was like they say he was wise yet understanding, and you've increased all of this stuff, right? But yet none of that matters because you will die.
Yeah.
And it says in 8, they will bring you down to the pit and you will die a violent death in the heart of the sea, in the same place where you said, I am a god, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I think, again, this whole nation is just a cautionary tale for us. Because even like, if you look at verses 15, I thought it was interesting. That it was like, from the day you were created, you were blameless in your ways until wickedness was found in you. Though the abundance of your trade, you were filled with violence and you sinned. So I expelled you in disgrace from the mountain of God and banished you, guardian cherub, from among the fiery stones. Your heart became proud because of your beauty.
Yes.
For the sake of your splendor, you corrupted your wisdom. And you know what's crazy? Like, this lament for that king, all I could think about was Solomon.
That's interesting.
Like, all I could think about was King Solomon, who, in my opinion, had a similar path.
Yeah.
Right? Who started off on such good footing with God. Praise for wisdom to discern and lead his people. Like, is discerning, but his fame led to the alliances that he made, led to all the wives and the riches and all those things, which ultimately led to him departing from the Lord. Yeah. And I was like, it happened in Israel. It's happening here in Tyre. Sure. Like, the pattern is the same, man. Don't allow the things that God has given you, the gifts, the wisdom, the beauty, the whatever it is. Don't allow that to make you think so much of yourself.
Yes.
That you elevate yourself to the place of God.
And you know what I thought about? You thought about Solomon. I thought about Satan. Because here in verse 13, it was like you were in Eden. Yeah. The garden of God. And every kind of precious stone covered you. And so we know that Lucifer was a very beautiful angel, right? Yeah. And then it says in 14, you were an anointed guardian cherub. Wait a minute. You was a cherub? Wait a minute. What are we talking about? So you a cherubim? Are you one of these angelic beings? And so that's why I feel like this started to mirror probably, because he said pride first in 28 earlier on. Yeah. It made me think, are now we seeing the reflection of what was underneath the king of Tyre? Right? Yeah. Like, are we seeing the spiritual influence that was behind the king of Tyre? That's so good. Which is probably Satan here, right? Yeah. So although we see in the flesh, we see this king of Tyre and this man who's boasting in his pride, but who is behind it spiritually and who is pushing him on and aggravating this is actually Satan himself, because I feel like the Lord is not talking to the king of Tyre. He's so like, good. I'm not talking to the physical. I want to talk to the spiritual. Spiritually, Satan, I'm calling you out.
Call him out.
Do you see me?
Call him out.
But yeah, but like
I'm like, you call him out. I'm like, talk to him. Where he at?
he over here and you was in the garden. But yeah, but if you continue on though, right? That to that 15.
Yeah.
On the day you were created, you were blameless until wickedness was found in you.
Yeah.
And then you sinned. And it says in 16, so I expelled you in disgrace from the mountain of God and banished you, garden cherub, from the fiery stone, from among the fiery stones. Your heart became proud because of your beauty.
Yeah.
No, he's right.
As soon as you says, like, literally just you bringing that up, like bringing up Satan, the rest of this reads completely different to
Doesn't
me. Like,
it?
as soon as you say that, and you're right, like, that does feel like what God is charging Ezekiel to point out, right? Which makes sense in the fact that Ezekiel has continued to give us insight into the supernatural, right? And the spiritual and what's happening beyond what we can see with our eyes, right?
Yes.
And so
Yes.
it would make sense that he would, like you said, be looking past the king to say, I see who's behind this.
Yes.
And let me talk to you. And again, and that's probably a similar path to what happened with Solomon and what happened with
Yes.
like with all of these different people that kind of get to that place of pride that you can look past them and say that's the enemy, right? And so like I don't know, it does remind me that again we wrestle not against flesh and blood,
You are
right? And the issues that we have oftentimes even interpersonally with one another, that there's an enemy behind it.
Yep.
That is manipulating and lying and deceiving and doing those things. And I think that is good. Like that is important. Let me just say, not saying good. It is important to point out that in this piece and to see that, because I absolutely think you're right. And not only do I think you're right, I think it's needed for us to know that what's behind there. So,
amen. Thank you, Jesus.
yeah, that's good. That's good. I know it kind of shifts gears a little bit here to talk about Sidon. As we kind of close out 28, anything jump out to you kind of in these verses from 20 to the end here?
I have no highlights.
Zero highlights.
No. Oh, wait a minute. What happened this time? I was all caught up and tired. It got real boring. I'm just kidding. The Bible's not boring. Anyways, but yeah, would you do the honors of going first?
Yeah, I think like I said, I think Sidon is often associated with Tyre, and I think because of that, because I think one of the things that's interesting is right, a lot of the other ones we've heard so far, we've gotten a because, essentially we've gotten a why.
Yeah,
we don't really get that from Sidon, and so again, I don't know if it's because of their simple association that their sins are also associated with Tyre and like what they were doing. But it's clear that again, they're also going to get their judgment for whatever it is they've done that we don't really get insight into.
And there's in the form of a plague.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. But again, it feels like there is definitely some association with whatever Tyre was doing and their association with them, that they're almost just like, again, just guilty by association.
Yeah.
Which leads to their judgment. But yeah, nothing necessarily super insightful there, but anything else kind of here in Ezekiel in today's reading that jumped out to you? Nope. Good.
Good.
Okay. Well, appreciate your thoughts. And again, hopefully this was helpful for you in your reading today as this goes along with it. Yeah, kind of some exciting things there in those first 4 chapters. Come back and join us tomorrow as we pick up on chapter 29. We have 4 more chapters tomorrow in reading. And again, we appreciate you joining us on the Vibes Daily podcast. See you next time. But until then, take care.
Thank you for joining us for the Vibes Daily podcast. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe on your favorite podcast platform or download our favorite, the Vibes Church app. Visit vibes.church/devoted for additional episodes, notes, details, and the latest merch. Join us next time as we continue our journey through the Bible. Take good care.